Let's get into some Vancouver Canucks discussion. Who is sticking around? Who is coming in? What names could potentially be added onto this team? And what does the future have in store for one of the most beloved Canucks in the system? Let's talk today about Brock Boeser. Let's talk about some other free agents that are still hovering around the market, like Patrik Laine, Vladimir Tarasenko, among others, and what this Canucks forward core can look like depending on the moves that can be done. Let's start things out by acknowledging Travis Yost on tsn.ca, who went out there and posted 2 days ago about how the timeline might push the Vancouver Canucks towards a Brock Boeser trade. We can also talk about what Patrick Johnston wrote about on The Province, how there is a pretty interesting to-do list for Vancouver Canucks GM Ryan Johnson, 1 month removed from the preseason. I'm going to leave links in the description to these two articles because they both have a pretty decent amount of info on Brock Boeser, the talent profile that he has, and whether or not that talent is really necessary in Vancouver at the moment. We could also talk about Patrick Johnston's Ryan Johnson to-do list and some of the names that are listed as potential Canucks additions. But in order to holistically dive into everything, we're going to head over to Spectre's Hockey from yesterday, August 26th, because Lyle Richardson does a pretty good job paraphrasing both of these articles together. On TSN, Travis Yost believes Brock Boeser could become a trade candidate as the Vancouver Canucks continue their rebuilding program. Boeser, 29, is entering the second season of a 7-year contract which pays him $7.25 million AAV, with a full no-movement clause. Yost believes Boeser is a better player than his stats over the past 2 years suggest. Nevertheless, he thinks his best seasons may be behind him, and it would be worthwhile moving him while his value remains high. Spectre's note goes out there and says that depends on whether Boeser wants to stay and be part of the solution for the Canucks. If he is unwilling to waive his no-move, they will rely on his leadership and experience to mentor their younger players. However, Boeser could decide his future lies elsewhere if the rebuild takes longer than expected. This season could decide where that might be. Now, I'll say this when it comes to Brock Boeser: if it comes out that Boeser has no intention whatsoever in abandoning the Vancouver Canucks, for lack of a better term, in letting this team go down the drain and stay at the bottom of the league, Brock Boeser, he seems like a stand-up enough guy to actually want to be a part of the solution here. And he's already expressed that he wanted to stay in Vancouver from the get-go, even after he had that 40-goal year. He was at 73 points. He scored all these goals in the playoffs, and then the very next season, he was in the last year of his contract. Boeser explained the entire time he wanted to stay in Van. Even if the best center that he played with in JT Miller moved on, even though there was beef with him and Elias Pettersson, even though the captain of the team and Quinn Hughes quit on the Vancouver Canucks, Boeser stayed through thick and thin. He wanted to be a part of this team. He wanted to help this team. We all love Boeser for that. But we also understand that he's 29 years old. We also understand that he's making $7.25 million to the end of 2032. The contract's not particularly amazing. It's not bad. There are definitely worse contracts out there, especially with the cap going up as much as it is. It's good, though, that Brock has essentially solidified that money coming into his bank account over the next 5 years or so. But ultimately, Brock Boeser is a player whose talent is probably a little bit hidden at this stage. 48 points in 75 games. You wouldn't look at that immediately and say, oh wow, he's worth $7.25 million. But honestly, if Boeser is playing on a good team with the right center, I do feel it's possible that he hits 30 goals in a season again. Everything just needs to go right. And the question is now, is that going to happen in Vancouver? I'm not all too sure. We saw rumors linking Boeser to the New York Rangers because, hey, maybe they could use another winger, and having JT Miller there with Boeser again does seem like a great fit, which we obviously know that fit works. Boeser had chemistry with Miller as a part of the 649 line, and then with whichever winger they were playing with in 2023-2024. But Brock, if he gets asked to waive, if Ryan Johnson sits him down and says, yeah, look, we're thinking about moving on from you, we are thinking that your talent could be used elsewhere and we want to get picks, I don't think Boeser would not allow that to happen. I think if he gets asked to waive, he probably does waive. That just seems to be the way that these NHL players are handling themselves these days. But with that said, if Brock Boeser finds himself off the Canucks, we could also talk about players that can come in and replace him in that winger position. Speaking of the Canucks, Patrick Johnson on the Province reports first-year GM Ryan Johnson is open to adding a veteran to his roster on a PTO or a full-on free agent agreement. Johnston noted that a handful of notable players remain in what was a talent-thin UFA market. Forwards include Michael Bunting, Patrik Laine, and Vladimir Tarasenko, while Logan Stanley and John Klingberg are among the noteworthy defensemen. Johnson could sign one of them, hoping they'll have a good enough season to make them a worthwhile trade chip later on in the year. Ah yes, the old Luke Schenn, Jamie Oleksiak, Paul Cotter formula. Sign these guys to 1-2-year deals and then just flip them at the deadline because they'll probably be a lot more valuable at that stage for teams that are making the playoffs and teams that are trying to do something interesting come the spring. But let's talk about Patrik Laine here, because I feel like for Laine and the way he was able to break onto Montreal's team the past few years, he had a really great first season with the Habs, 20 goals in only 52 games played, 33 points, and there was a stint where he was scoring power play goals like crazy. There was a lot of energy, there was a lot of love for Patrik Laine in Montreal. I'm not necessarily saying that that doesn't matter, but I will say that if he comes over to Vancouver, it's not guaranteed that the Canucks fans welcome Laine with the same open arms that Canadiens fans did 2 years ago. I do think that Laine would have to earn it, and it's also not guaranteed that he'd even be able to score at the rate that he was back with Montreal. I mean, this season he had 5 games played and only 1 assist. The guy hasn't scored a goal in the National Hockey League in over a calendar year. And for a guy who's known as a goal scorer, obviously that's not ideal. The Vancouver Canucks would be taking a really big risk on Patrik Laine, and there would be so much that needs to be retconned and fixed up from what happened last season up until now. The Montreal Canadiens were kind of held back by Laine and his $8.7 million AAV contract, not allowing them to get any super big fish at the deadline, and also the fact that they couldn't trade Laine in general, period. He's going to need either a PTO or some team that just really believes in him in order to find the potential to play 82 games in an NHL season this upcoming year, a feat that, by the way, he hasn't done since 2018-19. I understand the idea of getting somebody like that and then just building his value up and trading him, but I don't know if the Canucks are the right team to do that. Not to mention their focus on culture and leadership this upcoming season. I'm not so sure if Patrik Laine fits that bill. Meanwhile, Vladimir Tarasenko, you want to talk about leadership? Tarasenko has been around the block on a number of different teams ever since leaving St. Louis in 2023, but you look at the quality of some of these squads. Of course, he ended up winning the Stanley Cup with St. Louis in 2018-19. He ended up winning the Stanley Cup with Florida in 2024. Goes over to Detroit, things aren't really doing all too well over there, and then he finds himself in Minnesota, where they storm past the Dallas Stars in round 1, and they find themselves making the second round against Colorado. Vladimir Tarasenko has been a part of some pretty good teams, and I do think that experience can help whichever other teams he's going to in the near future. We saw Tarasenko take a chance on a team that wasn't necessarily a guaranteed cup contender a few years ago in the Ottawa Senators. He did the same thing with the Red Wings. Could Tarasenko put on his dad shoes and decide he wants to be a mentor on a team like the Vancouver Canucks? I mean, the idea of having a V player playing for the Vancouver Canucks makes sense in my mind, but you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section whether or not that makes sense too. And you know Tarasenko would be in a great spot to build up his value and then get traded at the deadline to some championship caliber club in order to give the Canucks some more prospects and draft picks. I actually don't think this is a bad idea, but you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Brock Boeser trade discourse? What are your thoughts on Laine, Tarasenko potentially coming to Vancouver? Let me know in the comments section down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.